Welcome, everyone. This is Jody King. I'm contract specialist with the Alaska PTAC. I'm showing it's just before noon, so we'll go ahead and get started. I show a few more people logging in, still showing they're aligning all of the audio. So we'll go ahead and give them just a moment before we get into the content. So instead, I want to welcome everyone to AGC's Lunch and Learn event for today, February 10th, and we're going to talk about an introduction to government contracting. And back when Gary Bushore, who's one of my coworkers, used to do this event, he would do it in 2 parts and had over 4 hours of content. So there's a lot of information to roll down into a 1-hour time period. So there's a lot of information that I've rolled into the slides, but we'll most likely just highlight and run on those, but you'll have the information to follow up with. Before we get into that, I want to do a little bit of housekeeping. I still show a few people logging in. Had a lot of interest in this event today. So on your GoToWebinar panel, whether you're on your computer or on your your smartphone, tablet, I do want to call attention. I do have a copy of the slides in the handout section. If you're like me, I watch a lot of my webinars on my phone because I like the mobility, but it makes it very difficult to download the files. So if you're unable to download the PDF of today's slides, you're welcome to email me after the event, and I'll be happy to send that out to you. I will have my email at the end of, in fact, actually, let's just make this easy. In the chat feature, I'll go ahead and add my email now. Give me one moment here. Let a few more of you log in. Okay, so it does have the general PTAC contact information at the end of the slide, but in the chat feature, I just added my direct phone number and email address should you have any questions after the effect. So again, on the GoToMeeting, if you look at the attendee section, there's 2 areas where you can interact with me, and I really like to encourage questions, comments, and get that discussion so it doesn't feel like such a one-way push. I really appreciate interaction. So there's 2 different ways you can ask questions. There is a question panel, and you're welcome to type or text in that question. Or if that feels like too much effort, because it's mid-February and we all have cabin fever about now, you're welcome to hit that raise hand button, and I'll be glad to call your name. I can unmute you on this side of the control panel and allow you to go ahead and ask that question. So again, 2 ways, type out the question. I won't be monitoring the chat so much, but I will be keeping an eye out on the attendee box, so it does show me if anybody's enters questions or has raised hands. So at this point, I'd like to take a quick moment to thank Kimberly with Associated General Contractors for inviting me to present today. This is a great opportunity for me to kind of extend my crowd beyond our normal PTAC clients. So thank you, Kimberly. And Kim, if you wanted to say a quick hello or hi or talk about AGC, just hit your raise hand button and I can unmute you. Okay, if you change your mind down the road, just let me know. So let's go ahead and get started. A lot of information and not a lot of time to cover it all. So real quick, because there are some names in the attendees list that I've not met before, I just want to take a moment to introduce you to PTAC, which is the, one second, please. Okay, refresh that voice box. I'm not making awful noises in the phone, clearing my throat. So we're the Procurement Technical Assistance Center, or PTAC, much easier to say. And we are a federally funded nonprofit organization. We have a cooperative agreement with the state of Alaska. And as you can see in the logo at the bottom, our grant program is administered by the University of Alaska. In the university system, we're housed by the Business Enterprise Institute, And PTAC is one of 9 programs. We're co-located, well, when we are all working at the office versus working remotely, but we're co-located with the MEP, the Manufacturing Extension Program, the Small Business Development Center, Andrew Crow's program on co-ops with the USDA funded program, the Center for Economic Development, the Small Business Development Center, and of course PTAC, which if I haven't mentioned this before, it's worth repeating many, many times. So hopefully what you'll take away from this slide is that first bullet that PTAC provides free assistance with all aspects of government contracting, from cradle to grave, start to finish for federal, state, and local purchasing activities. So it's really kind of handy. We're not limited to just federal contracts. We do provide assistance with state and borough, municipality, city of contracts as well. We do provide free one-on-one appointments. We do have free workshops. And sorry about that, didn't mute my phone. We do have free workshops. We do have some special events where we might have a small fee, but we try to keep those down cost friendly. If we bring in a special trainer and do a longer multi-day training, for example. And of course, the Alaska PTAC is one of 90 other PTACs across the US. So for those of you that might work with companies that have offices located in other states than Alaska, I encourage all of you check out your local PTAC in those states, because each PTAC, we really tend to become an expert in our own backyard. So I can talk to you about the state of Alaska contract process, but I couldn't even begin to talk to you about what's going on with state of Washington or back east for actual that state and local contracting. So moving on. So today's agenda, I'm going to bust a few myths and excuses. And when I started PTAC back in 2009, there was a big B2G event. I don't know if any of you remember that, at Business to Government, B2G, and they had a week-long series of how to get rich quick sessions, flip houses, sell to government. And for about a year after that event, we had 20 plus calls a day of everybody that was going to make it big time selling to the government. And I will never forget the one client that walked in and kind of flopped down in my chair and just kind of slid down in that seat. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to sell the government whatever they want. What do they need? Give me the list. And that comment there really created my very first introduction to government, where we went into the whole gotta be a business first. So I'm going to save that for the lot of you. I'm assuming that if you are doing this through the AGC registration, that most of you already have an existing business. So instead, we're going to talk about busting myths and excuses. I have one question. Let me pull up the question box here. Okay, Jules, I see your comment about scheduling an appointment, and I have my direct phone number and email in the chat box. So if you just want to email me, we'll go from there. So let me go ahead and just clear that. Thank you. I like having questions at the very beginning. So back to the agenda, busting myths and excuses. We're going to talk about learning a new language, which is really that differential between commercial and federal contracts and commercial and federal clients. We're going to talk about preparing for federal contracts. We're going to do a really fast speed dating version of flipping through registration and certifications, more just because I wanted to have that information for you than I'm going to dig into that. We're going to talk about finding solicitations, this introduction into market research, and what are you going to do if you're interested in pursuing government contracts. So bear with me. I do want to kind of pull through because I'm hoping to have enough time at the end of the presentation to really dig a little bit deeper into the market research component under that finding solicitations. Okay, next slide. So busting myths and excuses. And I've been at PTAC, this is my 13th year. I have heard some really great ones. So that first one again is from that 2009 event. You can get rich selling stuff to the government. Government contracting can be very lucrative, but it is not the easy, quick turnaround ticket to riches that it has that myth of being. So there are a lot of people that would say, oh yeah, I made all my money, I created businesses, we got our 8A certification, I got a couple contracts, and then I sold the business with the contracts and opened another business. And they kind of package that as this, really fast turnaround activity. Uh, Again, government contracting can be lucrative, but it is never that quick slap dash turnaround. I'm sure as some of you are nodding your head at. The second one, you can mark up your prices because, well, government, aren't they the guys that bought that multi-million-dollar toilet for space and the special screwdriver that works underwater? So it's really funny that the individuals can remember these odd stories about unique government expenditures. But when it comes down to it, government contracting is probably one of the more price competitive activities that you can get into. And I'm sure that you all, especially in the construction industry, know that those profit margins aren't as fluffy as we would like them to be. It is a really competitive. And if you're at that where you're kind of ballparking or estimating or building your price proponents of that proposal based on stuff you've done before without having that spreadsheet in front of you, you really could, one, have a healthy proposal, but then outprice yourself from the price component comparison, or two, missing costs at the table and truly whittling away that profit. So we'll talk a little bit about that and highlight it on understanding your costs to do your price proposals. A third one, government will pay people to help them find stuff they can't find. I actually had two of those conversations last week, that they are going to be procurement people for the government and help them find the hard stuff. And that conversation always rolls back to, well, that position is what they call inherently governmental, that there are contracting officers who do market research, as well as the program folks that do that market research. And there's venues such as sources sought or special announcements for agencies to look for those goods or services that they might not readily find at their fingertips. So being that middleman, it's unlikely that government is ever going to pay you and give you a contract to be the person to find them stuff, those goods or services that they can't find. I still get those calls though, like I said, earlier last week. So you have to be in business for more than 2 years. This one I hear a lot, especially for people that are new to the government contracting arena, and somebody has told them that you are not ready for government contracting until you've been in business for 2 years. Which kind of rolls into that next myth. You have to have past performance in government contracts to get government contracts. There is a truth factor to that one, but it's not necessarily that straightforward. And that's kind of where we start talking about experience versus past performance. And this gets to where we really highlight that when you do your technical proposal and you're doing that past performance. In a nutshell, experience is you, the individual, as the project manager, as the cost estimator, as the crew lead that you have built up over your lifetime. And say possibly you've decided now's the time to start your own business, and you have 20, 30 years experience in the construction engineering or engineering field, or as a CPA or any other, but you are now opening your own business. And now you're getting hit with that. Oh, you got to be in business 2 years. Well, this is where we're rolling in your marketing, your experience to show your knowledge and your experience doing this type of work, presenting and being able to provide and complete the scope of work or those performance work statements. Now, past performance is what the company builds. So you as a new owner might have just opened John Services a year ago, but it's the work that has been performed under that license of John Services that starts counting towards that past performance. And sometimes you really have to sell that experience and direct, because ultimately it's those individuals in our business that are doing that work, and it's their knowledge and expertise that we're rolling in under the management of that contract, which falls under that past performance of the company itself. Next myth, the government takes forever to pay. Well, I have talked to people that have had a contract they completed 5 years ago and they never did get paid. But then it was one of those where it turned out they never actually invoiced, or they did the invoice, it was rejected for something, and they never got back to it. So the government does have a set, and we'll talk about that a little further on. They do have kind of a net 30 default, and they will pay. The clock begins upon receipt of an approved invoice, and if necessary, depending on the type of work, the approval of yes, they really did what they said they would do, and those signed receiving reports. But there's a lot of confusion on that government takes forever to pay. The one benefit of government contracts is that they always will pay. And I'm still working with contracting officers on getting those individual companies with those old outstanding invoices and still getting those paid and taken care of. Second to the last line, too much red tape, too many pages, solicitations are too long, it's too hard, I don't understand the language. And it's not that you can't do it, it's just a matter of learning that new language. And that's where PTAC is to help assist you with that whole procurement process, the language, the clauses, the provisions, to make it doable. And I've worked with a few people and they're like, we can do this. And after they've learned and started to see what is that repetitive component of federal contracting and understand the world in which they were bidding, they were successfully submitting proposals and gaining contracts. So it is doable. And yes, it is a little bit much at first, but one step at a time. And the last one, I just need to get a mentor-protege agreement or a JV. I need to get someone to hold my hand, align that, and provide me with the things I don't have, and then I'll be ready for government contracting. And we're going to talk about this particular, I'm not going to go into it now, we'll talk about this section under the teaming a little further on. So certification myths. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but sometimes we hear those too for those that are just starting in government contracting. And I hear language like, because I am, and fill in a certificate, I'm HUBZone, I'm 8A, I'm woman-owned, they have to give me a contract. And not necessarily how it works. And agencies will pick me because of my small business certifications. Not necessarily. Agencies do decide how they're going to impact their small business goals. And if that's a terminology not familiar to you, let me quick roll that up. So the federal agency has been dictated. The federal agencies have determined that a minimum of 23% of money spent in the procurement arena shall be set aside for small business. And there are several subcategories of small businesses under that overarching umbrella of small business. And that's where there's a lot of confusion, that because they have a small business certification, that it is a give me opportunity for that solicitation, such as that next line there, 8A certification will guarantee me contracts. And again, that's a little bit misnomer. I've talked to a lot of businesses that have started in government contracting, but then they've put everything on hold to do all of their applications and get all of their certifications in place, and then start looking for solicitations and looking for activities. The one takeaway I want to give you from this particular slide is this has to be balanced against your workload, cash flow, potential opportunities, and these small business certifications can be definitely helpful, especially for set aside where competition has been restricted down to these certifications. it limits the bid pool. And from a full and open competition, and I have going to talk about that a little bit more for those small business subcontracting plans where the prime contractors are looking for subs to assist them in that small business goal. There is marketing value in having these certifications. And if you're kind of starting in that government contracting or you're interested in the certifications, we're going to highlight them real quick. Again, I really don't want to spend the bulk of my time there. I'd rather encourage you, this is my little fishing expedition here, to have you reach out to PTAC, to myself, to anyone else in our PTAC programs where we can really do more on the certification processes that your business might be eligible for. So you do not necessarily have to have all your certifications before bidding on government contracts. Now, when we're talking about professional certifications, such as a licensed structural engineer to be able to stamp drawings, CPA, registered nurse, yes, those professional certifications, the licensing must be in place, but not necessarily the small business certifications, which you'll see in just a moment. And last but not least, we hear this a lot, they have to give me preference because I am. And here you might see Alaska Native Corporation, a tribal corporation, minority owned. And the word preference is really confusing because it's not used often in government contracting on the federal aspect of government contracting as a predetermining, but it is used in state contracting where we have bidders' preferences. So the word preference is really confusing. There is one time, if you're in the HUBZone program and it's full and open, then preference can be applied. But again, another conversation for later for those of you that are HUBZone or looking at HUBZone. But there is that confusion of that term preference, that weighted intent because of. And that's not necessarily the case. It rolls back to government contracting and those small business set-asides where often the contracting officer has done the market research and they've predetermined which set-aside, woman-owned, 8A, service-disabled veteran, the HUBZone, which subset, a small business set-aside, that they are going to apply to the solicitation, and that becomes a pre-filter for the bids. So it doesn't ever have any weighted average at the time of a bid evaluation. All right, so let's move away from that. So let's talk about learning the language. And I'm going to pause 1 second here. Okay, commercial versus federal. So I am, again, making the assumption that a lot of you are in the construction or engineering arena, again, because this was marketed through AGC. And if you're not, I apologize, but bear with me. But there was a period back again, 2009, 2010, where the Alaska residential housing market really took a hit. And all of those specialty custom homes that kept a lot of residential construction companies, they might do 1 or 2 over a year. And because of the uniqueness, the size, the specialty of these built homes, made to order homes, that demand went away. And they were trying to move from just residential market into a commercial market. And that alone had different requirements, different licensing factors, different cost points, a whole different group to market to. And so there was a language change there, going from that residential specialty housing into that commercial world. And then when we take from that residential commercial construction and move into government, it really does seem to be a new change. Ultimately, you still have a client that has a unique need, because we all think that what we want to spend our money on is unique and special. And we're doing this in a bid process, and the language feels stilted and defined. It's providing, those solicitations provide us that legal structural world under which you're going to submit your proposal. But ultimately, you're still proposing on the type of work that you've done before. It's just how you're putting that proposal together and the forms that you're using where it can really get confusing fast. So commercial versus federal. Let me clear the air here for those of you that really haven't entered into the government world. So let's talk about making the sale. So when we are in that commercial world and we have, whether it's our project manager or cost estimator or our direct sales individual that is reaching out to the client and they're building that rapport and that relationship blossoms, and the client then says, absolutely, we like you, we like your company, let's move forward. So in the commercial world, the individual that you're talking to, the one that makes the decisions, may also be the one with the buying power. They may be authorized. Maybe they run quotes through another manager, check the budget, and that internal decision. But usually the individuals that you're working with often are the ones that can then also commit the company to spend the money. So when we're talking about government, we still need to build those same relationships and work with those decision makers. But unfortunately, often on the federal side, those decision makers are not the ones that get to obligate their own budget. That has to go through, depending on the dollar size and at the different threshold and the immediacy of the need, that has to go through the contracting side. So that there can be really confusing. So back to the slide for a moment under that making the sale, we kind of talk about determining need versus buying the goods of the service. So again, commercial, that really could be the same person. And if you're talking about residential, such as a residential roof, and I'm the homeowner, you say that correctly, homeowner, then if I decide, yes, this is where I'm spending, we can begin that conversation. My yes, let's do it can start whatever contractual exchange and beginning with that. Often for individuals that are new to the government contracting arena, they start this relationship with one of the program sides, and the individual on the program side is excited. And yes, this is exactly what we need. Let's move forward and let's have talks and let's make plans. And ultimately, then once everything's determined what they're going to do, paper has exchanged hands, quotes have been given, and else, and it goes over to the contracting side, and that individual who has now invested time and effort into putting preliminary costs together loses out completely. It goes through this the contracting open bid, competitive bid process, and the individuals weren't prepared. And I did actually have that happen with a company that did structural buildings, and they were working with one of the agencies up here, I believe it was a Park Service for a remote building, and they actually spent 6 months working with that group and with the manufacturing itself to engineer the building, included all of the structural, the snow load, the wind loads, weather concerns, and came up with a blueprint of what was actually going to be produced. And then when it came time to do the contract aspect and the solicitation went out to bid, the award wound up going to another company that wasn't involved in that entirely because they had a different cost point. And unfortunately, those individuals that were working with the agency weren't recouped financially for their time and effort, and the manufacturing, who also was building the plans and providing the engineering, lost that sale as well. So there's a little bit of that understanding of the individuals that we need to talk to, because we do need that relationship, but are they those individuals that can guarantee the federal government is going to pay us for that time and effort? And often in the case, like when you're pre-building, there's conversations that you can have. And again, I'm not going to really get into that now. That's if you're in that circumstance, are you finding where you're building that relationship and they want more effort from you? There's things that you can do, get them a quote to do some design work, run it up to the ceiling on the micro purchase threshold on a credit card. And of course, there's limitations on that as well. The potential if you do something along that line, you might be limiting yourself from competition because you were part of building the bid package. So there's always these give and takes, but it's one of those things that we need to understand the difference, and this really comes down to that language on commercial versus federal. The individuals that are building the budgets know what they need to spend, know what they need to have happen to be able to get their program to run, are not necessarily, again, never the individuals outside of that micro purchase threshold that get to guarantee you're going to get paid for your work. That has to go over to the warranted contracting officers, and that warrant in of itself is the one that obligates the federal government to pay you for your effort. So that kind of goes back to that program managers versus contracting officers, and we have that often apparent authority. And that phrase apparent authority, and if you just Google that alone, apparent authority, there's a lot of legal information about that. So say you are already in the existing contracting arena, you have a contract now, and you're working on base, and you have a ranked individual that comes through and tells you to make a change, do this instead of that, they want this color, not that color, they want this area larger, and they are directing activity, committing payment, and are ensuring that this is what is meant to happen, start now. And they have that apparent authority. Sometimes you'll run into that with the contracting officer where there might be a discrepancy between specs, blue lines, the different prints, and then you have the COR or COTR, those technical contracting officer representatives online saying, nope, this is the change because that's wrong, you need to do this. And even if it's a small thing that has a cost component impact to your contract, and often that happens, we go ahead and incorporate because there's that apparent authority. This is a whole nother workshop. Real quick, do a free marketing. I'm doing a webinar, you can register on our PTAC website, on managing contract changes. And this is one of those things that we're going to be talking about, dealing with that apparent authority and getting approval on those contract changes on the fly. So confusion, commercial versus federal. Again, back in the commercial world, often if that individual that is saying, yes, these changes have to be made on the fly, again, they might be those individuals that are in charge of the purse strings and can go ahead and make that, where all of those roles are rolled up into one individual. The next bullet, handshake, deals, quotes, proposal, who signs what? So often we will have where you're responding to that confusing, simplified acquisition, combined synopsis, solicitation, it's right there. They don't have any forms and you're just providing a quote or you're giving that bid. And do you use your own form? And when can the government sign your own quote? And quite honestly, the answer to that should be absolutely never. So when you're working again with that commercial and you're providing quote, often there can be small print as part of your form for your quotes that talks about payment due upon receipt of work, deposits, any sort of legal anything rolled into that fine print at the bottom of the quote. Well, the federal agency is not allowed to sign other business forms that might limit or define the contractual relationship with the federal government. So even on the simplest of activities, maybe you're just simply selling them roofing joists or lumber, supplies that you're not even doing the construction of, you still are required to fill out the federal form and you're agreeing to those terms and conditions that are defined within the solicitation. So even if you have quotes on really simple turnaround and you've written it and you've included that in your submittal packet, if that purchase order is awarded, that terms and conditions that may have been written on your quotes are not applicable. So sometimes there's a little bit of confusion there. I just wanted to clear that up, which is hard to do in a few moments. But yes, the who signs what, we're always going to be in the federal arena. We're always going to have a federal bid packet that you will need to submit. So if you ever have a contracting officer asking, hey, are you interested in doing this work? You say absolutely, they say great, we'll send you a bid packet. Can you get it back to us as quick as possible? Even when it's a streamline for those commercial applications, you will still need to do their bid paperwork. And that ties right down to that next the next bullet on legal issues. What to do when it doesn't work? Well, then we're back to who signed what and what is the legal structure of the federal contracts. And ultimately, it's when the things go wrong or there's questions that government solicitation then has the language, thus the crazy red tape and those too many pages when we're looking at a solicitation, but it provides the legal structure, and those clauses and provisions incorporated into your contract protect both you, the contractor, as well as the federal government. And so if you're working with that in that prime circumstance, you have that legal guidance. So now we know if there is something that's not working right or we have questions, where do we go to start finding those answers? And it's always going to be, well, let's go back to the contract and see what the contract says. For those of you that do a lot of subcontracting work, did you sign a subcontract agreement with your prime where the correct clauses and provisions that were mandated in the overall federal contract roll down? Because again, there's provisions such as paid when paid, on those payment that a prime has to pay you within 7 days of being paid themselves for your invoices that are incorporated in that Prompt Payment Act. So there's language that protects various tiers of subcontractors as well. But often it's that contract, regardless of what tier, whether you have that direct ward as the prime with the agency, or you're coming in as a second or third tier subcontractor, those contractual agreements are going to fall back. One thing with the subcontract agreement, we really want to look for language that is in direct conflict with those prime contracts, especially in areas that are mandated to be rolled down and to be applicable for all levels of businesses completing that scope of work. Again, whole nother conversation. And Kimberly, if you're looking for another lunch and learn, legal issues, subcontract, who signed what, always great topics. So last real quick, boy, talking too much and we have a lot to cover. So payment terms. So most federal contracts, purchase orders are going to be default to a net 30 unless you offer a different discount. Construction, I believe they pay on a net 14 versus a lot of working with your commercial where you'll see on the quote or on the invoice, it says due on receipt of invoice. And that is not necessarily the case. I believe the quickest the agency can turn around, most cases, 14 days when we're doing the progress payments for construction. And if you're looking at something other than construction and you're providing a bid, if you don't request a shorter term around pay or offer incentives such as like a 2% discount if they pay you in 10, then the default is going to be they'll pay you on 30 days upon receipt of that approved invoice. So that whole cash flow process can be really different between commercial and federal. So preparing for contracts, do you know your business capacity? So if you're new to the government contracting, it really comes down to, are you ready to compete in a very competitive market? And when I say, do you know, are you ready to compete? We really are talking about your business capacity. Bonding capacity, your work in progress. Do you have available manpower and equipment? What is your contingency planning and resources? And are you able to communicate that contingency in your technical component of your solicitation so that the agency knows that you are less risk than you might appear because you have your contingency resources in play? Do you have the appropriate staff? Have they been trained? Does your workforce have any required certification? A great one is any of the HAZWOPER, 40-hour HAZWOPER, the basic health and safety certifications that you need before you can do work on military bases. And the last one, which again is a whole nother discussion, but what does your accounting system look like? Are you ready to tackle your pricing and tracking of, and the differences again between those allowable for commercial versus allowable for federal in the accounting system? Do you know your business pricing factors? And how about government registration? So again, I want to hop forward because I am talking too much. So again, you guys have this information for you in the slides. So I'm not going to talk about pricing factors. If you have questions, reach out to us. But let's talk about these government registrations. It's the start point. So we used to do a 10-step booklet, and step one is, register in SAM, the System for Award Management. And we're going to show, I do have a few screenshots of this, and I do have the database up to show you. The purpose of the System for Award Management is this is the mandatory registration for any entity or even individual that is receiving federal funds, whether via contract, via grant, loan, assistance programs. The CARES Act, the PPP were very unusual that those were the first federal programs that didn't actually require you to be registered in SAM before you were able to receive those funds. And I think they did that just because of the pandemic and the emergency of need. But the System for Award Management provides your business contact information. It has all of your vendor payment information so that when a contract's awarded, that payment data is in place. It has your representation certifications where you are certifying that you're a small business or have not had any issues with contracting before, you've not been blacklisted, you don't owe taxes, you've not been involved in a felony situation, those type of things, that representation certification. And also it just provides to the government the NAICS codes, those industrial codes of who you are, what you do. The dynamic small business search is a subcomponent off of the SAM registration, and this is where SBA has provided this, so it's a different ownership, but you can go in and search dynamic small business and the results only return small businesses. So it excludes large companies, it excludes organizations such as like PTAC, universities, so it's only looking for small businesses. So that aids the government contractors when they are looking to meet their small business goals. And when I say small business, sorry, I did not mean to roll that forward. Here's some of the types we're talking about: women-owned, veteran, 8A, and this is a business development program, and of course HUBZone, which is really predominantly based on where you are located. So SAM, information that you need to do your SAM registration. I have this for you. I'm not going to go into it now. Dynamic small business search. We have the website, and again, the why you do that. Here's, you're providing this additional marketing information. It's free marketing that is not included in your SAM profile. And last down here, did you know that state buyers, primes, other businesses use this dynamic small business search website when they're looking for potential subs, teamies, or vendors? So it's not just used for the federal arena. Keep that in mind. It's worth taking the time to fill out that additional information. So small business certifications, in a nutshell, we have the SBA issued certifications, 8A, which is a business development program, the HUBZone program, the women-owned small business and economically disadvantaged has moved over from a self-certification as of October 1st last year. And if you are a woman-owned business and you're looking at being able to put a bid in for a set-aside, you now must have a certification from SBA to be eligible. And if that's setting off any alarm bells with you, just give PTAC a call and I can give you further information. They still are allowing third-party certifiers. That hasn't phased out. You can pay someone to do that certification for you, but you still have to complete the SBA certification. You're just rolling that document from the third-party certifier into your application to SBA. In SAM itself, you are self-certifying, and there's your subset, that you're a small business as defined by your primary NAICS code and that associated size standard, and of course, as minority-owned, women-owned, veteran-owned, service-disabled, veteran-owned. I do want to let you know that the service-disabled, veteran-owned is changing. We'll get to that. Here, the next few slides just give you the information, HUBZone Map, on the various programs, but again, just because of time, I don't want to focus on that at all, but I did want to provide you with that information. Real quick, the VA change. Right now, the way it stands as of today, if you're looking at a service-disabled veteran-owned small business set-aside for anyone other than the VA, and that does include military, then your self-certification in the SAM registration is sufficient. That is changing. It's in process. I would anticipate it being 18 months to 2 years before this becomes required for all federal agencies, not just the VA. And when that happens, it'll be fully under the purview of SBA, the Small Business Administration. So this has been in process of changing. Things like this, so government moves slow. So if you're a veteran and you've not marketed that status, then again, reach out to PTAC and let's have a discussion. I'm going to go ahead and move forward. I just want to give you a heads up. So real quick, Sam, here's the subcategory on that general information page where you select, and I've just checked these boxes here just to get them to expand so you can see the full menu. And I just wanted to have that screenshot of this is how you are defining that socioeconomic category. State DBE program, you can select that in SAM. Again, it's another certification, but I'm not going to discuss it now. I'm teasing you, sorry about that. Commercial certifications, again, that whole commercial versus federal, I did want to let you know that there are some federal certifications that do have commercial value, so I just wanted to provide that information to you. We are down out of time. So finding solicitations, because I can imagine this is the reason that most of you have joined this webinar today. Whether you're experienced with government contracting or new to it, it's finding those projects that can be the most challenging. And my first question when I sit down and work with somebody, when they're like, yeah, we want to do government contracting, I ask, well, let's find out if the government buys what you sell. And the first thing I say, well, who are your commercial clients now? Now, for those of you in the construction industry, that's a pretty easy answer because all federal agencies are going to have construction contracts. It's not limited to one particular agency, and it's not something that we have to find out where is that sold, such if you're doing specialized training or management training or process training. That might be a headquarters activity. So basic market research, and these are the initial questions that I ask you. Who are your commercial clients? Let's find that agency that are the government equivalents. So which agencies are buying your goods or services? So the easy answer is, well, all of the agencies are buying those goods and services, but are they buying them up here? And in what frequency? So is there a procuring officer buying that here in Alaska, where again, it's in our own backyard? We have an opportunity to build that client agency relationship, or is it the case like FAA, where all of the nearest contracting office is in Redmond, Washington? There are no contractors for the Federal Aviation Administration here in Alaska. Or the VA, all of the contracting offices, the nearest one is again in Washington. There are no contracting officers for the VA here in the state of Alaska. So that kind of ties into what I'm talking about when we say the where the purchasing office. And it doesn't necessarily mean that because there are no contracting officers up here, there's not work for that agency that's solicited here in the state. It just can be more challenging to build that relationship. And then this here, would you be interested in that government contracting as a prime or a subcontractor? So often if you're a very specialized business and that need is part of a larger whole, let's say you sell fire extinguishers, fire suppression systems, complete with the panels, maybe more complex, but often that need isn't necessarily a standalone activity. It's often rolled into an overarching construction contract. Maybe you have an existing building and they're upgrading. In that case, that you might have the opportunity to be the prime, have that relationship directly with the government. But oftentimes, if you are a specialized entity or a subject expert, a lot of your work is going to be done as a subcontractor. And in that case, our market research is, yes, we want to know which agencies are using those and have that need. But now, because you are specialized, we need to find out, well, who are the prime contract holders that are going to need your expertise to be able to complete that overarching contract. And fortunately, we really can find all of that information, where to find the primes, do the research, find the, that potential, and we can use the dynamic small business search for finding those small businesses. And we can go into FPDS, the Federal Procurement Data System, when we're looking at past activity. And I'm going to show you that site here shortly, and hopefully in depth if I can talk a little faster, that past procurement on those federal activities, which then allows us, well, if they bought it before, they can buy it again. And if we have a potential of working with a prime or a subcontractor, we can even look up that business in the Federal Procurement Data System to see, well, what is their contract history? It's a great database for finding information. And the last question here is, what is the buying cycle? When does the contract renew? So if you are in the snow removal business, now's probably not the time to be looking at government contracts. You'll want to do that when about September, October, as we're moving into the new fiscal year, and that's when any contracts up for renewal for those snow removal services come out for bid. If you don't do snow removal, but you do landscaping and all the exterior greenery, now is absolutely the time that you want to start watching for those opportunities, because most of them come out and are usually in play around April, so that once we get back to summer and get out of our white winter locked world, those contracts are in play and the contractors can begin their performance. So that buy-in cycle is also really important. The best example is, again, for janitorial, where those can be anywhere from a 2 to 5 year contract, and you need to know where, and again, that comes back to market research, where in the cycle, when is those contracts going to come up to renew, so that you can be prepared and keep an eye out for those solicitations when they post. So how is it all linked? And of course, things are changing. We have what used to be FedBizOps, where all the solicitations were posted in the federal business opportunities. A year ago, November, that was all moved under the Beta SAM, and now it's contract opportunities. So the federal government is required that if they are posting a solicitation and it's over a certain dollar size, a lot of it is 25,000, then it shall be posted on beta.sam.gov and under this contract opportunities tab in those solicitations. It is not unusual to find an opportunity in Beta SAM under contract opportunities that then directs you to another website where the solicitation itself is actually housed. Department of Interior really likes fedconnect.net and opportunities for BLM, Park Service. Often you might see an initial notice and then a link to direct you to that fedconnect.net website where you can actually then download the solicitation. Just a heads up, Beta SAM and SAM are supposed to be merging this calendar year. Some of that is slated for April and May, and I know in April, contract opportunities is getting revamped. I've seen a few screenshots of it. It's going to be much easier to use. So a few of you that have started in that contract opportunities world and find it frustrating, they are issuing version 2 of this spring. And from what I've seen, it should be a lot easier to use and do your search. But when we talk about market research, not just finding the solicitations, but we want to find agency information. And I just want to show you how all of this is linked. We have this dynamic small business search, which pulls information from SAM, which can give us our potential primes, our subs, give us that teaming data. We have USA Spending.gov, which shows us where the money is flowing through. And if you haven't looked at this site and you're thinking about looking at contracting, you want to start with the people, with the agencies, with the organizations that are receiving federal funds. Because if they've received federal funds, they have a finite timeline in which to spend those funds. and they've already had programs, work, solicitations, things that they have defined to build that budget to be able to make those requests for those funds. So once they're funded, those things are going to then be implemented and that money is going to be spent. So for those of you doing residential housing, the great example is the housing authorities. There's 52 housing authorities in the state of Alaska who all receive federal funds from HUD and Urban Development. And we can track on the USA Spending, we can see the funds from HUD and who are those grant recipients. And then we know that that money is going to then be realized into housing projects. FPDS, because again, this is after the awards have been made, that data is housed here in the FPDS, that's that past. And often when we're looking at, it's the government, the right client for me, we forget about these other agency-specific websites for doing that research. And often if you're starting to build that relationship with a new agency, you should be looking at that agency website. So a great example is the National Park Service, Forest Service. Not only is there the federal agency website, but there's also the website for the Alaska District of, where they talk about specific concerns, needs, and areas of interest to the state of Alaska for that agency. And if they're highlighting that specifically on that state website, that state-specific website, you can be pretty sure they're spending money to support those programs. Agency forecasts, agency budgets. The agency budgets, this is a great if you're looking in the military construction. All right, quick snapshots. I'm down to about 5 minutes, and I honestly could easily give you about another half an hour information, but I won't drag on. So contract opportunities is on the beta sam.gov site. On that homepage, you have this search engine, and you want to select contract opportunities, and then you're looking for. And I just have a screenshot that I pulled. This is an older solicitation you can see from last year. But this is where, if you're looking for federal opportunities, this is your start part in contract opportunities. Say you find something in contract opportunities and you want to know the procurement history, well, then we can actually go back into the federal procurement data system and we can start doing search, and there's a whole search process, and we can find out that contract history. We can find the incumbent, we can find the money that was spent on that particular contracting activity, and we can get an idea of what's going on. Again, FPDS, you can enter somebody's DUNS number. And if you remember in SAM, that was one of those starting points. We can go into the SAM site, look up somebody's DUNS number, then I can come into FPDS with that DUNS number and search, and I can find out, well, what is that company's contracting history? So if you're looking for primes that might need your area of specialty, there's ways we can do that using those two different sites and find out which agencies are they working for, which might give you a better opening line when you reach out to those companies. USA Spending, again, this is a snapshot I pulled last night. In the last 12 months, for the state of Alaska, we've had over $13 billion in awarded funds, and that's, total grants, direct payments, contracts, loans, other financial assistance. But there is federal monies moving through this state, and these monies are required to be spent. So I just like pulling that out. Finding solicitation search, there is search software. So there's two that I'm going to highlight. There's hundreds of different packages, and because I'm with PTAC, I want to highlight PTAC itself. So granted, we can go into contract opportunities each day. You can build search criteria, build little search bots that work for you in SAM, or you can have a subscription service and build your search profile and have daily alerts saying this is new for that activity. Here's the information that came out today. PTAC is, we do offer our bid match solicitation search software. It is free to active PTAC clients. And again, this is something that we can have a conversation with after the fact. I just like to pull that out. But to not overshine my host, I wanted to let you know that AGC also has an online plan service. One of the benefits of AGC over the bid match solicitation is I know AGC sometimes will have commercial activity where bid match is only going to be federal, state, and local contract activity. Where PTAC is picking up the subscription fee, it is a simpler search software. There are better programs, but those do come with a fee, and we do have the AGC online plans. I'm going to pause for a quick second, check my questions. Let me pop out that question box. Kimberly, thank you. Not a question. Kimberly Gray from AGC, it says many PTAC services are free. Thank you. And then Richard says, I'm a dealer of products, equipment. Do you know why in Alaska there seems to be a negative response from agencies to use organizations such as Sourcewell? Richard, I think you and I should have a question outside of today, of this webinar, simply because, one, I'm not familiar with Sourcewell, and it would probably be better for us to set up an appointment and let me answer that question more specifically. So if in this case, in Richard's question, that you're a retailer or a wholesaler equipment, then yes, at some point in time, the federal agencies will buy that directly, but often in the world of construction, we might want to look at who are the individuals that are going to use that equipment, or those the stuff, the commodities that are needed in order to complete that scope of work. And then that case is where we're going to want to go in and find out those prime contractors. And we can even base it on opportunities, going through bid match, looking for specific construction opportunities where we know that type of equipment. And again, that gives us that conversation opening point. But Richard, I'm sorry to not answer your question immediately. Again, my contact information is in the chat. And if you just want to reach out to me, let's set an appointment and I can answer that question directly, simply just because I am out of time. Let me quick finish the last little bit here, guys. Solicitation search software. If you're not familiar with the AGC online plan service, look at the AGC website. I know there's a point of contact that can help you with that. If you're interested in bid match, more information on bid match, feel free to reach out to me. Again, you can do all of this daily on the contract opportunity site. If you're looking for more specific how to use contract opportunities, I do have a pre-recorded webinar on the PTAC website, ptacalaska.org, and you can kind of just skim through that recording and learn more on using the contract opportunities, or you can set an appointment with PTAC and we'll be glad to really work with you specific to your organization. Okay. I have so much more. And I'm just going to quick highlight and then I'll let you all go. Really, the next step is when we find, yes, those agencies, their agencies are buying what you sell, we want to talk about building relationships. And I already mentioned a bit about building relationships with the agency itself, but it's also really critical to build relationships within your business community. For one, that networking value for that information flow, but two, for those potential prime sub teamed approach to being able to complete solicitations. And one of the biggest things, and I kind of mentioned this at the beginning, those myths, that if I can find a mentor, everything will fall in place. So I do have some information on the SBA All Small Mentor Protege program. There's lots of training available, and of course you can look up more on the SBA website. If you want to reach out to me, I'll be glad to give you links and more information directly on the All Small Mentor Protege program, both its pros and cons. But again, I'm sorry, I'm kind of out of time on that today. Last thing, joint ventures. There's a lot of misuse of that word joint venture. People say we're good at JV, we're going to JV. And they're using that as meaning some sort of teamed approach. And they use that JV as an interchangeable type of team approach. And I just kind of wanted to highlight here for those of you that might be new to that terminology, it's where business A and business B create business C for a specific targeted activity. Often JVs are meant for a limited duration, although not always. And of course, they must have their own SAM registration, tax ID number to be eligible for government contracts. And there's more information, but give me 2 more minutes, everyone. Building relationships, there's a team approach, full and open competition, and then you're responding to prime contractors with a subcontracting plan, and you're marketing to that specific need as to why they should use your business. I just wanted to point out there's a few networking opportunities where you can meet these individuals, even in our current pandemic social restriction world. And I have a list and the website for these different agencies, and these are all related to construction industry, some more so than others, but I just wanted to pull that information, their contact information. Each one of those links is for the Alaska chapter where applicable. And really have some information on, again, building those relationships, that marketing plans, and I'm going to leave these for teasers, things to think about. And if you need more information, reach out to the resources that can help you build these marketing plans, marketing materials. So in conclusion, roll up everything that we've talked about, but what I want to take my last 2 minutes on, even though I'm over my time, and I apologize for that, if you're not familiar with Alaska Small Business Development Center, then truly you should be. You can see right at the top, this is just a quick screenshot of their website. They have a COVID-19 resource center, and it is phenomenal. There is so much information on that website. If you are having questions or having issues with that are COVID related, check them out. If you're looking for financing, one of the things that we talked about is, do you know your price points, your break even, your costs? If that's an area where you need more assistance, then Small Business Development Center is that resource for you. They do free one-on-one appointments. They have low-cost workshops. Some of their workshops, their on-demand workshops, are free. It's worth checking it out. And a lot of people don't really think about them when they need that additional assistance. And of course, AGC, fabulous association, and they also have a lot of networking, great source if you're looking for training specific to your industry, construction. Check out their website if you're not familiar. And of course, finally, here's the contact information for PTAC. So, deep breath. I'm going to quick double check my question and answer box. Yes, thank you, Kimberly. She just put in the question box to remind you guys that there is the Department of Transportation, DBE, the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Conference. It's all virtual. You can find information both on the AGC website and the PTAC website, as well as the State of Alaska Civil Rights Office. They'll have information on their event. It will be free for any of you in the construction arena. There's going to be great information, and this is a good connect to state contracting as well for Department of Transportation. So keep that in mind if you're looking for more training information. And I truly apologize that I talked so much at the beginning. I really didn't get a chance to go into detail on how to use the different sites I briefly highlighted, the Beta SAM contract opportunities, the federal procurement data systems. But I do want to let you know again, check out the PTAC Alaska website. Scroll towards the bottom, there's a bright orange tab that says see all training videos, and I do have how-to videos from previous webinars where you learn how to use FPDS or contract opportunities in more depth. So I am running over. I'm going to do a last 30-second call for questions. Again, my contact information is in the chat. My name is Jody King with the PTAC, and my email is jlking8@alaska.edu. My direct line is 786-7270, or you have the main PTAC contact line here. If you have questions on anything that I rapidly talked about today, please reach out to us. Let us know how we can help you. Let me schedule that time to do the one-on-one appointments where we can tie this information much more specifically to your business and help move you into that next contracting step. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for hanging with me, even though I'm running 8 minutes late. And again, I apologize for taking up that additional time of your day. At this time, I'm going to officially close the webinar, and I wish all of you to have a fantastic afternoon. Stay warm.